everybody. I am Cassidy. I am the Hippie Catholic. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe to be part of the conversation. I am here with my lovely friend Michelle Fleck, and she is an ex-Catholic trans woman who I am very blessed to have as my friend. And yeah, she's an amazing person. So, could you tell us a bit about yourself, Michelle?
Thank you. So I was, as you said, raised Catholic in Louisiana, was where I grew up. And my teen years were difficult. Let's just say a lot about that. I didn't even know at the time that trans people existed. And yeah, that was not a fun time. I would not relive that time at all if I could. But while I was in high school, 9/11 happened, and my family has a strong military tradition. Every male in my family had served in the Army, so it was expected that I would enlist. But I chose the Marine Corps to prove that I could be more of a man than they were, basically overcompensating. So I enlisted as soon as I graduated high school, ended up serving in combat in Afghanistan, and I was injured over there. And when I came back, I had a lot of questions, like the typical kind of big questions about life. And that was the first step in a long process that took a couple of years that eventually led to my deconversion. And the deconversion was a necessary step to come to terms with my gender. I came out in 2016, and the main reason I did it, because I had fought against it for years, because I figured out this was the only way I could live a happy life. It was either come out, transition, or dead by suicide in 6 months. And that's actually a pretty common story in the trans community.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Like, it's so heartbreaking because I have heard that like almost exact testimony from a couple of the trans people that are in my life, and it's like it's so sad, like the amount of like, well, because okay, like our society, at least in the West, is very gender roles are very rigid, and gender performance is very rigid, and you have like this expectation to uphold like certain gender norms, otherwise you're seen as like an outcast, and that's so difficult. And I'm like a cis woman, so I can only imagine like what trans people go through. Also, I've heard the story many times that a lot of times people have to deconstruct their faith in order to find their true beliefs. Like I actually had a similar experience with like deconstruction, where I finally read the Bible, like the full length of the Bible, and I was kind of really disturbed by like the genocide, by like, you know, different things in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and I couldn't find any answers within like the evangelical church that I was like kind of like going to at the time, even though I was like a cradle Catholic. And eventually that wrestling was what caused me to reconsider the Catholic faith, which is kind of odd maybe to some people. Like, why would you know, deconstruct and then come back to like the Church of Rome? It seems a little strange, but that was my experience. I feel like, which this might be a heterodox opinion, but I feel like that the Catholic Church actually has more room for diversity than a lot of people think it does. And I think that a lot of that has to do with just like the body of Christ, the true church, the people within, you know, the Catholic religion, taking up their crosses and sharing their stories in genuine ways. Yeah, again, thank you so much for being here. Like, what do you think was your relationship with Christianity in your childhood? Like, how were you raised with Christianity?
I never questioned it. Um, I was taught to believe, that this is the absolute truth and you have to believe this or you'll be tortured forever. When I hit puberty, it got rough because what I was being taught at church um, led to a lot of self-hatred. And that's the main reason my teen years were so difficult. It would have been easier if I had known that trans people existed back then. Like, if I had known that, it would have been so obvious that I was one. But I didn't. So I'm dealing with this self-hatred that I've been taught through my religion. I'm dealing with dysphoria that I don't know is dysphoria because I've never heard anything about it. So there's just a lot of self-hatred and a lot of confusion, mainly. Confusion from the dysphoria because, like I said, the fact that I'd never heard about it didn't make it go away. There are plenty of instances I look back on now to my younger years, and it's so obvious, oh, that was gender dysphoria. But at the time, I didn't know that. So it was just having these symptoms and just being confused by them.
Especially like before the internet was like really available to a lot of people, it was a lot harder to have access to certain information and access to certain communities online. Like the internet's a very flawed place, but one of the good things about it is that it's able to connect people that maybe otherwise wouldn't be able to connect and have solidarity with one another. What would you say was like the first time you realized that you were trans? Like how old were you? Like how did you realize you were trans? Like what's that story?
I was 30. And at that point, I'd known about trans people for a while. But I always was thinking, oh, I can't, I'm not trans because, or I can't transition for all these reasons. It's too expensive. I'm worried that I'll never look good as a woman. The violence against the trans community. Like I said earlier, what eventually convinced me to come out and transition was it was either that or I was pretty sure I was going to end up dead by suicide. And that basically countered the violence part. You went from a high chance of being murdered to a definite chance of being dead. That kind of changes the equation. So I had all these reasons why I didn't want to transition, but I never thought to ask or to notice. None of those reasons was ever I'm not trans. For some reason, that thought never occurred to me. And I can remember the moment I realized that, and I was like, wow, shouldn't that have been the number one reason? And it was like watching all these pieces flying around my head, and then suddenly they all come together into a perfect picture. It was an an emotional moment.
That's like such a powerful testimony. And I feel like that something that a lot of people within the church, within the Catholic Church in particular, because that's the church that I'm in, a lot of them don't like really realize the amount of danger that trans people put themselves in just by being themselves. And that's like, and it's so upsetting to me because like Catholics will go and say like, oh, we're so pro-life, but then like where are they when defending trans people? Like where are they when defending like other LGBTQ people? Like that's why I really like Father James Martin, because he really helps like recenter LGBTQ issues as human rights, pro-life issues, and like true pro-life issues. Like not just nominal pro-life issues. So I know that you touched on this a little bit earlier, but like what has been like your journey with God? And like I honor like wherever you're at with your journey with God, if you believe in God or you don't believe in God, like I honor wherever you're at, but I just feel like that we need to be more comfortable with like holding space for people that have questions about God or don't believe in God or just have their doubts, because I was in that place for a while. I was agnostic and atheist for about a year and a half. Like I was like closeted about it because my family, they're very like, I was raised Catholic, and though we weren't particularly practicing, the idea of coming out as an atheist to my parents would probably shake them a bit, which is kind of funny. I don't know, like yeah, but yeah, like what's been your journey with God and spirituality in general?
I've been an agnostic atheist since the age of 25. Uh, and right, I mentioned earlier how Afghanistan led me to go into the Bible and like ask all the big questions. Um, Shortly before, uh, I guess you could say my deconversion, I was attending Mass daily. I was praying a rosary daily. I was reading the Bible every day. In fact, I'm still reading it. I'm currently working my way through the King James version, because I had all these questions that I couldn't find answers to. And I remember the exact moment it happened. Um, I was visiting my aunt in Michigan. She's very religious, so I was going to mass every day with her. And I was just so bothered by these questions that one afternoon I just went for a walk in a nearby forest. And it was the same like with the trans thing earlier, like that moment of enlightenment when I realized I don't know the answers to these questions. And that's okay. That's a difficult thing, I think, for people to admit. A lot of times, sometimes it's okay to say I don't know. So I walked out of there. So I went into those woods. I believe Catholic. I came out saying, "Well, I don't know. I guess I'm an agnostic now." Anyway, so I went over to Buddhism for a while because I've been studying Buddhist philosophy for a little bit already at that time. In fact, when I lived in Grand Rapids, I attended the Buddhist temple there. I don't consider myself a Buddhist anymore, mainly because I just feel like I've I've drifted away to a point where that label would no longer be honest or accurate. So now I'll just say I don't have a religion. I'm open to being convinced, but that's a big issue with me, is that I, especially with my past, like if I'm going to adopt a religion now, I'm going to have to be really convinced that it's the way to go.
I think that that's like extremely valid, and actually like that reminds me of a story when so I minored in philosophy and religion in college, and I was really mentored by this lovely religious scholar that she studies secularization, and she went to college at Oxford in England, like yeah, the big Oxford. And she she was very respectful of like religion and very interested in it, even though she was like agnostic herself, even though she believed that there was some higher power, even though she was like, I don't know what it is. She's like, I believe there's something, but that was like her personal belief. But one time I approached her and I asked like, hey, like what about like this whole like Catholic thing, this whole like God thing? Like I know that there's good arguments like for and against like the existence of God, but like you're a very smart scholar. Like what's your take on um like all of this academia, like which one's right? Like, and I remember she looked at me and she was like, it's always going to come down to faith. because there are convincing arguments for and against the existence of God and for and against Christianity. And she's like, ultimately, it's always going to come down to, who do you say I am? And that's like what like Jesus obviously said that in the Gospels and stuff. And I just thought that was so mystically potent. Like, it's always going to come down to, like, who do you say I am? Do I believe this? And I think that the true healthy belief is being okay with the uncertainty, and like admitting that your beliefs are a shot in the dark, but that you're willing to take them. Because I think that something we see a lot with when it comes to faith is a lot of times people think that faith is certainty, when in reality, if you are so sure in your beliefs and so sure in your correctness, that's what leads people to blow up buildings. That's what leads people to marginalize other people, when they're so convinced that they know the heart and mind of God and don't leave any room for God to come in and teach us or teach them. And I think that that's why, like, I really love reading the testimonies of the saints, like particularly like the mystics, like Teresa of Avila, like Therese of Lisieux, like Saint Gemma Galgani, because those saints really questioned, and they really allowed for like the mystical presence of God to enter their lives, and they admitted like their littleness in comparison to the universe. And religious people would be like so sure about like a particular like theological standing. It's like even the Eucharist, like the Eucharist in itself, like it's a walk of faith. Like when you're taking the Eucharist and you're saying, I believe that this bread and this wine is the physical embodiment of God, like that is challenging. And it's fundamentally challenging, and I think that it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be something that really makes sense. It's going to always be something, like the Eucharist is always going to be something that makes demands of you and makes demands of like of your faith. And I think that sometimes, like, I've had like Eucharistic experiences where I've really felt the true presence. Like, I believe that I've felt the true presence in the Eucharist. I've also had times where I've received the Eucharist where I feel nothing. It just feels almost mundane. And like I hate to say that about, like, you know, God, but I think that that is, again, like very mystically telling. Like, that this God that is the very fabric of reality, created reality, will also humble himself to the form of bread, like, so that like he can go unnoticed. Like, that's always been something that's like always been so like challenging to me, but also like so like wondrous. And I wish that like we would see more Catholics like talk about like those deeper like mystical mysteries within the church, and like that, because there's so many like treasure troves within the church for us to like explore, that like that mysticism is like what calls people in. Like it's like, sure, like we need apologetics, we need like theology and stuff, but it's like, allow there to be room for mystery and like unknowing, because that's when God really reveals like himself to us.
I agree with a lot of that, and I still attend mass sometimes, partly just because the Catholic liturgy, the Catholic mass, is just a beautiful service, you know, and I can respect that even without believing in it. I definitely agree with a lot of that about the mysticism and the and I had those experiences too, especially in my younger years. And at the time, I thought, you know, they were supernatural experiences. These days, obviously, I have a somewhat different opinion, but I definitely agree with a lot of that, and I understand where you're coming from.
Would you want to talk about those experiences at all?
There were Oh, there were a lot. I think one of the most common ones is like you just go to mass or receive the Eucharist or something like that, and you just get like chills and goosebumps. And it's where you think where at the time I thought I was literally feeling the presence of God. Um, there were a couple of there were a couple quite a few dreams actually that I thought were at various times supernatural. Even a couple of what I thought were visions. So it was pretty diverse, and those experiences were a big part of keeping me in the church for as long as I stayed.
I've spoken with people that are in my life that have had Eucharistic experiences where they've actually like received the Eucharist and like have tasted like blood that wasn't theirs, like, and like all sorts of stuff, like it's so amazing when like the Eucharist just like reveals like so many like mysteries that like challenge reality and challenge like our perceptions of reality, and like the fact that I can say like I know somebody who experienced that and like they're mentally well, very, you know, like science believing, they're a very science believing person, and like they're like, yeah, I had that experience and I can't explain it. And I think that also like I would really like recommend for you to really like look into like the mystics like Teresa of Avila and stuff, because they would have visions and stuff. And I think that there's a misconception about Catholicism that kind of some Catholics have perpetuated, unfortunately, that Catholicism is like devoid of mysticism. I've spoken with a lot of people that feel like they have spiritual gifts that feel like that they have not, that they don't have like a place within the church because of people being afraid that they're mediums or being afraid that they're like doing like necromancy or something, but that's like not what a lot of these people are doing. And it's so sad because I'm like please, I'm like, read Teresa of Avila, read like stuff about like locutionists, like read stuff about and like find like a spiritual director, maybe like guide you into that journey, because it's like the Catholics do have like a mystical tradition of like people being able to like prophesize and like have visions and like, and it's that's the kind of stuff that always like fascinates me with Catholicism. And that's always the like always when like the legalism and like the religiosity like drives me away, like it's always like that weird like mystical stuff that like calls me back to it. The church needs the mystics and needs, because the mystics are the people who like challenge like the like hierarchy and challenge like the power structures like that be. And that was why like even when a lot of these saints like were alive, like they were very, a lot of people were uncomfortable with them, like a lot of people didn't really know like what to make of them. And I feel like that like I have met so many LGBTQ Catholics that are some of the most like orthodox Catholics like that I've ever met, like easily. They have like some of the most like developed, mature faiths like that I've ever come across. It's like they get overlooked like so much because it's like on one hand you have like, I know like the LGBTQ community is obviously like very diverse, but like there's some LGBTQ people that are like, no, you like cannot be Christian and be like LGBTQ. And then it's like on the Christian end, a lot of Christians like, you can't be LGBTQ and be Christian. So it's like people that find themselves like Christian or Catholic and LGBTQ or have to always stand in this like strange liminal space that is always going to have doubt present. And that's difficult for like a lot of people. But I feel like that LGBTQ people have like so much to offer the church, because like LGBTQ perspectives challenge, like they just challenge us. And I think that that is really really important, you know, like tradition and like progress, like I feel like need to challenge like each other so that we, because we're all like on this journey to like find like the truth. And like my perspective, which I don't know if anybody else like shares this perspective, I don't know, but it's like I feel like that like anybody, like I've spoken with so many atheists that say like I if I am to worship anything, I worship the truth. I worship what is true. And to me, I'm like the truth is Christ. Like the truth, if you are striving to pursue truth, like we are worshiping the same God. Like that's my like mystical belief. And like something I love about Vatican II is that it also like clarified in the catechism that like you can be an atheist or you can doubt your faith and still like go to heaven if like you're a good person. And like it leaves it open in a way that the catechism used to not leave it open, like to people that are experiencing doubt and stuff. And actually, like one of the reasons why I reverted to Catholicism was I found a lot of Catholic reverts who were agnostic, who were atheists that had gone through a similar process. And it's always like yeah, like actually what brought me back to the church was like I realized like that the church did have some like compelling existential arguments, but I also realized I had like some like spiritual experiences that like I couldn't debunk. And even like other atheist people who are still atheists, mind you, even they could not debunk certain things that like I had experienced or that they had even witnessed in my life. And yeah, it's just I just love mysticism.
I was big into it too, and I've studied a lot of the same mystics you're talking about. In fact, in my early 20s, I got deep into Jesuit spirituality. Even tried to join the Jesuits at one point. There was one moment I was on a Jesuit retreat, and there was this rocky hill with at the retreat site with a statue of the Virgin Mary on top of it. And I climbed up there like in the middle of the night. I forget what hour it was, but I had been up for a while praying, meditating as you do. And I climbed up there, and it was a difficult climb because of how rocky the hill was, and sat there next to the statue and was like, okay, here I am talking to a statue. And that was how I told the story the following morning. It was like, and then everyone was like, "You climbed all the way up there? That's a difficult climb." Another saint I was still a huge fan of is Jeanne d'Arc, Joan of Arc in English. As mentioned, I'm from Louisiana. Cajun French is my first language. I'm still a huge fan of her. In fact, in the science fiction series I'm writing, I named one of the main characters after her. I would definitely agree that if I worship anything right now, it would be truth. Although my two cats might have something to say about that. But
Yeah.
when you said that, it reminded me of a line I wrote. So I have a collection of poetry that I've published. It's on Amazon. It's called "A Demented Tirade of Disorganized Thoughts from a Dysphoric Trans Girl."
I'll put the link to your poetry in the description box below if any of you guys want to check it out.
But there's a line in one of those poems, and it's of all the things I've written, it's a line that stood out to me the most. It says, "There is only one God, and her name is truth." Although I wouldn't use the word worship, I that resonated a lot with me when you said that.
Thank you. Yeah, well, because something that I've found like when I've spoken with atheists and agnostics about Christ and about like the pursuit of truth, like I feel like that we both kind of like feed each other's like worldview and like kind of feed each other's perspectives, because I feel like that like human beings are wired to pursue like the larger questions, and in some people have even argued that like humans are hardwired to worship, and even that animals are hardwired to worship. And I always thought that was like very very odd. Like it's a very odd behavior that humans share with a couple other animals. I think dolphins I think worship as well, which it's like it's so weird. Like why do humans and why do like animals like have this instinct of like looking for like something higher if like that something isn't there. I spoke with one of my friends that she was like agnostic at the time, and like one time she was like considering like theism, and she was like, she's like, we have like this concept of like good, like where does that come from, like why do we have this instinct to like pursue what is good, and like if there is something called good, like what sets the standard of good, like is it society? But like every society, even if their good looks different like than from other societies, like everybody still is striving for this thing called good. And like what is that, like it's so like it's so bizarre. And it's like I know like the power of human psychology like is definitely like a fact. I honestly feel like that a lot of like mystical experiences do like have like human psychology as like a component, but I don't feel like that like takes away from the mystical experience. I think that that's the way the God I believe in operates, is by operating through the mundane and the extraordinary. I mean, it's like, for example, like something that I've always found fascinating is how like we even have like guardian angels, right? It's like guardian angels are like ridiculously more powerful than us. They're ridiculously more beautiful than us. They're ridiculously more extraordinary than human beings, but yet like they guard us and like watch over us, and like we are finite, and like our bodies are anyway, like we're mortal, and like they have never had a body, like they are just like beings of pure spirit. And like the dichotomy in that of like that's the way God operates, is like pairing like the extraordinarily powerful and like incomprehensible with the mundane. And like that I feel like is so compelling. I don't know. I love, like I've been trying to like get more into the practice of like praying to like my guardian angel, and I also pray to Saint Michael the Archangel as well. um Obviously like Joan of Arc's like my patron saint, like I know we've connected over that before. She's actually been the patron saint of a couple trans people that I know, like so I kind of consider her like the unofficial like patron saint of like trans people.
Also the patron saint of the U.S. Marine Corps.
I was taught that in CCD we were taught that, yeah, that she's the patron saint of like I think like, yeah, like the military, I think like the US military. What were the things in your life that really helped you like embrace and like accept like who you are, and like accept your like gender identity, and like not just accept but like celebrate like who you are?
Uh, the moment I realized it, the very first thought to go through my mind was an explicative. If I can remember. Around that time, I was looking up videos on YouTube. How do you know if you're transgender? And I found a lot of them, and they all had pretty much the same answer, which is if you're asking that question, the answer is yes. And at the time I was thinking, that's the wrong answer. That's not the answer I want. But so I was still living in Louisiana at the time, and when I realized I had to come out, it became pretty clear I need to get out of the South. My husband passed away in December, and his funeral was basically almost all trans women, because these were all, friends that came out to support. I absolutely love the trans community here. They helped me so much. I'm not alone. That feeling of knowing that you're not alone, that there are these other people here who have these same experiences and are here to support you. 2 weeks after I started hormones, I woke up one morning and something felt different. And I sat and thought about it for a bit, and then realized, holy crap, I don't want to die. And that was the first time in my life I had ever experienced that. And the only way I got that experience, and I cannot emphasize that enough, like prior to that moment, my entire life, I had pretty much constantly wanted to die. And then when that was finally lifted, and it was only lifted through transitioning.
So many of my viewers tell me that like they have like no access to like any progressive Catholic spaces. And like that's like so sad to me because like I was raised around that stuff and I was raised around like Vatican II, and it's sad. Like I think that this country and the church, I feel like that they've become skewed to the right in the past few years. Like I feel like that people like to say that religion and politics like don't go together, and like they do. Like because politics ultimately reflect what your values are and like what you think is important, and so does, and religion is often what also informs your values. They ultimately usually do go together, and I don't think it's bad that they go together. I don't think that like overtly like endorsing like a politician should be like something that like religious institutions like should be doing, because like, you know, church and state and stuff. And I also just don't think that that's like helpful to the community, to like the religious community at large. But like I feel like having like general political leanings, like and being like, yeah, I'm a progressive Roman Catholic, or I'm a conservative Roman Catholic, or I'm a moderate Roman Catholic, I don't see any problem with that. A lot of times the conversations that society would like us to avoid are like the conversations that actually like need to be had. What would be your advice to a trans viewer watching who is not in the financial position to transition? Like what would be your advice to them?
Seek out a local support group, because there are resources, and local support groups are an excellent way to find local resources that can help. The best thing you can do is find a local support group, because they will usually be able to direct you towards local resources. Because the transgender community is very, very big on helping other trans people. It's amazing. One of the things I love about this community. And I mentioned how when I had to go to court for my legal name change, there's this thing here in Chicago called the Transformative Justice Law Project. They provided me with a lawyer for free.
That's amazing. Community organizing is like so important because it really does like take a village to support like a single person. For me, I feel like that's such like a reflection of what like the embodiment of like church like should be, of like that community like supporting like people. And it's so sad because like organized religion has like left so many people behind because of their own biases, and really that's defeating the purpose of what like church should be about. You mentioned the Jesuits earlier. What are your thoughts on Father James Martin? Because I know a lot of people have opinions about him in the religious sphere, but like I know that like he says that he does like a lot of like LGBTQ activism within the church. Like, what are your thoughts of him as an ex-Catholic trans woman?
I am actually not familiar with him, but I will definitely be looking him up.
He wrote a book called Building a Bridge that a lot of people said didn't go far enough for LGBTQ people, but I think that the purpose of his book was to just kind of make a floor for other people to build on. I think that the purpose was like building a bridge between like the rigid Catholic hierarchy and like LGBTQ people in a way that like nobody else had really done before. So I commend him on that, but I also like feel like that the LGBTQ people who are saying that like maybe he didn't go far enough, I feel like that they're valid to their feelings as well. What are some things that you wish that the Catholic hierarchy knew about trans people?
One, we don't choose this. Two, despite what the church says about transitioning and hormones and surgeries and such being grave sins, those things save lives. Like they are literally suicide prevention. Definitely in my case, and it's the same for pretty much every other trans person I know, that these things that the church is now saying cannot be done because they're such serious sins, if those things are not available to us, people die. And the Catholic Church is supposed to be very pro-life. So I really wish they would get that sorted out.
I wish that they did too. And I think that And I also feel like that, especially like due to clericalism, there's been like such a disconnect between the hierarchy of the Catholic Church and like regular everyday Catholics. And I feel like that's a shame, because I feel like that, like, also from just like talking to like people who have studied to become clergy, they're like in seminary, they're like seminaries like teaches us to be like cut off kind of from the world, like. And I know that like some of that's like just what being clergy is all about, like there's that disconnect is really, I think, harmful to a lot of people that are in the body of Christ, that are the laity, because there's just that misunderstanding. And I also feel like that there's things that the laity can learn about the clergy that we don't really get exposed to those kind of conversations, because there's that gigantic rift. And I feel like that also, since like the sex abuse scandals, like people have like very little trust in organized religion at large and in the Catholic hierarchy. And I definitely share in those feelings to an extent. Like that's why like I started working with like Gemma Hoskins from like the Keepers, and like working on trying to help like get momentum around like Sister Kathy's case and stuff, because I definitely believe that there's suppression of a lot of important issues within the church, because of the simple reason that people are terrified of change, and they are terrified of even positive change, because I've seen people like get stuck in careers they hate, and they stay there because they know they like give the excuse of like that they it's the devil they know, because they're so afraid of change, to the point of, even if it would be better for them, even if it would be healthier for them, it's too scary. And like I understand that, because like I have like generalized anxiety, I have OCD, I have PTSD. Like it like the unknown is inexplicably, unchangingly scary.
Yeah, that's why it was such a big deal when I mentioned earlier, when I realized it's okay to say I don't know.
Okay, and it's healthy, and I think that it's healthy for like not only people that are just like agnostic, but also people who do have like a firm belief system in something, like or that they're theists, or if they're atheist, or if they're whatever they are. Like you have to leave room for like, I don't know. And even like when there's like issues that are like political that are being brought up around you, and you don't know enough about that issue, just say like, I don't know, I'm going to research up on that more. Like that's been something that I've been like trying to practice as well, because like if it's silly to act like that we know absolutely everything about like everybody's experience. And that's also, I think, something that feeds into the disconnect between the clergy and the laity, is that like the clergy were the educated class, the laity were the uneducated class, and we still see remnants of that. And we even have groups of Catholics who want to return to the clergy knows best, and the laity are like children in faith and not adults in their faith, which is contrary to what Vatican II teaches. Vatican II teaches that the laity are adults within the faith and are like should be educated in the faith. Knowledge is power. Ironically, like if people knew more about their unknowingness, or were more aware of that, I think that we would live in a better society. What would be like your advice to like everyday Catholics who want to like get involved in like fighting for trans rights, but like don't really know like where to begin?
Listen to trans people more than anything else. Just listen to us, ask us, what we need. That's a big problem, not just with Catholics, but in our society at large. You have a lot of people trying to tell us who we are or what have you, and not enough people listening. And there's a lot of well-meaning people that have good intentions that end up doing things that might harm the community because they don't listen to us.
Even like there's people within like the LGBTQ community that don't stand up for trans rights as much as they should, and that's really like upsetting.
There are also trans people who are actively harming our community, which is why I've said many times that the only person the trans community hates more than Donald Trump is Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah. It's like the paradox of like tolerance. It's like you can't tolerate intolerance. And I think that that's something that a lot of people misunderstand, like when communities of people will say like we can't tolerate what this person is saying. They'll be like, well, but I thought you were so tolerant. But it's like, well, if they're preaching intolerance against the majority of the community, like we can't support that. What would be your advice to trans Catholics who are out of the closet or in the closet? Like what would be your advice to them?
The only way you're going to be happy is if you accept and embrace yourself and learn to love yourself as you truly are.
Like I could tell you're a writer because like you just like say these lines that are like really like insightful. I will definitely leave the link to your poetry in the description box below, and thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much guys for watching. Please consider supporting me on Patreon. That really helps financially support what I'm doing, but if you're not in the financial position to donate, that's totally okay. You can still support the channel by liking, sharing, and commenting on my videos. I'd really love to hear from you, and thank you so much to my lovely patrons. You guys inspire me and allow me to do the work that I do. So yeah, thank you so much guys for watching. I'm Cassidy, I'm the Hippie Catholic. God bless.